we need peace, man. Some of these rebels are really crazy, and though like I'm really happy to see Assad go, I'm very frightened for the Kurdish community of Sheikh Maksud. I'm very frightened for the Kurdish community of Tal Rifat, who have already been occupied, and I'm very worried about just how that will play out in general. But so far, I do have to say that they're being less crazy than they could. By a lot.
I can't, we're going to get into this in a second, but the wild thing is HTS, Jolani's boys, are being the more reserved. The SNA are engaging in the normal looting and pillaging and fucking nonsense.
They're gangsters and rapists and stuff. Like they're like, they're like the Dizengoff, Dizengoff. What's the guy's name? The guy that was like it was the criminal battalion of the Nazi SS.
Oh, Dervanger Brigade.
Dervanger, that's it. Yeah. They're like that equivalent.
Dizengoff. You're very close. I mean, I honestly, my first thought was, is that like a Lord of the Rings reference?
I think it's actually a mall in Tel Aviv, Dizengoff Center. I think that's why I got it. I think that's what I confused it with. But anyways, they're like really, they basically were put in there to fuck with Kurds.
I mean, that's all they do. I mean, I haven't seen the Syrian National Army actually fight anyone else but the Kurds.
I mean, they're cobbled together from a lot of rebel groups that definitely fought, but like it's just basically it's grift now, and like they're fighting. They're going to get against the YPG, and they're there on the ground. But apparently, they've been clashing a lot with HTS, and it seems like a lot of chaos on that front. But all that being said, hallelujah that Aleppo is free of the hand of the Assad dictatorship for now.
Okay, so we got our first question from chat. Thank you, IMB Mike, for the tier 1 sub. Why is Hayatir al-Sham woke now?
They're not. They're full of shit, and they'll always be what they are. But I think, like, if I had to take a guess, I'd say that I think that what they're aiming for is something like, okay, please don't make me analyst brain this. I'm not trying to be an analyst. I don't know.
How about we get to this? Wait, Patrick. How about we get to this later? Let's say what's happened first, because wait. Can we get back to that question in a bit? Because if we're saying why Hayatir al-Sham's woke, and someone's like, what the fuck is a Hayatir al-what? I think we're having an analyst discussion. We're not having a broadcaster discussion. So let's quickly break down what has happened. So, first, why was there, and I know this, we're starting a little ways back, but people have been checked out of this war for quite a while, if they were ever paying attention in the first place. What incited, and I know you can go back to Hafez, I know you can go back to 1982, Hama massacre, you can go back to the 2004 football protests that were put down, you can go down to the corruption, to drug abuse. There's so much that the Assad regime has done that you could go back to and point at. You can look at the actions of Mahar, like Assad's brother, who's a butcher if you've ever heard of one. What incited the revolution in 2011? Because there was the Arab Spring, and that was going on in the region as there were revolts throughout the region against many authoritarians. But there was circumstances in Syria that were domestic that helped incite this, and there has to be a match. What was that match?
I mean, there was obviously like economic problems that a lot of people like to look at that geopolitical stuff. Like Assad, contrary to like what certain people on the left will tell you, that Assad was very much a neoliberal. The poor of Syria suffered greatly when a lot of the social programs that existed, at least, I mean, his father was like Joseph Stalin for the Middle East too, so I'm not trying to justify him, but there was at least some kind of like social distribution that completely went away with Assad's reign. And so obviously a lot of people lived in poverty, and obviously there was issues, a lot of people that are environmentalists, which is a good cause also, but people will tend to attach their beliefs to their analysis for this. So it's like environmentalists will say that it's because there was a drought and it's caused by global warming, which of course, that partially contributes to it also. Economists will say it's because the economy liberalized and the poor got left behind. And like geopolitical analysts will say that it's like, because Soviet power waned or whatever. And to me, I think really the main reason is just because it happened at a time when it became super easy to gather a bunch of people together because of social media and because of like messaging apps. and because it became much easier to get video out to the world. So it kind of, when Hama happened, people were completely cut off. When a lot of these things have happened, there's been no communication. You're muted.
Sorry. When you talk about Hama, by the way, you're talking about the 1982 Hama massacre, when the Muslim Brotherhood took over the city of Hama, about 1,000, 2,000 fighters, and so the Assad regime surrounded the city, and Hafez al-Assad's brother, who was given direct orders by Hafez, shelled it until they killed about 20 to 25,000 people, which left a bad taste in the mouth of many Syrians.
Absolutely, and that's like there's the expression Hama rules, which is how they describe the way that the regime cracks down on opposition. And the history of that massacre led to a lot of the Syrian diaspora being sent to different countries. It's really like a defining event. And of course, also, like you mentioned before, you had the 2004 massacre of Kurds in the 2004 massacre of Kurds in Qamishli.
Yes, which was incited by the way, your camera's off. Which was incited.
I know. It's a second.
I got you. Which was incited by there were people it was a football match in the local football stadium, and there were the Kurdish people supporting the Kurdish team, and there's people supporting the other team from out of the area, and the people from out of the area took up a sign that had Saddam's face on it, and were like chanting like pro-Saddam stuff at the Kurds, considering the fact that Saddam had just died, and we all know what Saddam did to the Kurds. He gassed them, which then caused clashes, which then culminated with the Hafez al-Assad statue being torn down, and that was such an offense to the Assad regime that they had to send tanks and soldiers to go kill men, women, and children.
Well, I mean, yeah, that was a great summary. I actually visited that stadium in 2018.
Well, that's interesting, Patrick. Why should we listen to you? Who are you, and what's a Syria to you?
What is this a question from chat?
No, this is my question.
I don't know. I mean, like I've been covering. Oh, okay, yeah, I've been covering conflict since 2012. Do you want to show the video that I sent you?
Oh, well, yeah, I'll show some of the videos that we sent you. But this is my way of asking you to introduce yourself, because I realized mid talk that you haven't actually said who you are.
Yeah, I was just actually thinking earlier about how like a lot of viewers probably know like some of the lore. Like it's weird to like run into a Ukrainian guy that like knows that like I've had problems like on a bus in Turkey. Like it's just. Did
that happen?
Did I have problems in Turkey?
No. I mean, did you run into a Ukrainian guy that knew about your Turkish bus problems?
Yeah.
We'll save the Turkish bus story till the end. But
yeah, we'll save it later. Anyway, so I'm Pat Hilsman. I'm a reporter. I started covering Syria in 2012, and then I did several trips to Aleppo between 2012 and 2014, and then I went to Qamishli in 2018. And I've been working on a lot of articles about Syria, a lot of investigations about Syria, and also I was one of the investigators on the documentary The Search for Assad's Executioners, which was about pro-regime militia that were killing people in Yarmouk refugee camp. And we were able to track down some of the people who were perpetrators and locate them in Sweden and Germany. And a couple years later, they ended up getting arrested. And so it was an important investigation, and very proud of that investigation, and a lot of people helped me with it, like our colleague Jet, and that's basically the realm that I work in.
Okay, understood. So you were there for the Battle of Aleppo.
Not for all of it, obviously, but I went there several times during the Battle of Aleppo. Yeah.
Got you. And you were these clips that you sent me, are these clips filmed by you?
Yeah, they're all filmed by me.
Okay. Is it okay if we take a look at this quickly?
Go for it. You can watch all of it. I set it up specifically for this. It has captions too that show where it is.
Gotcha. 1 second. Let me just go live here so you can see it and all of chat can see it.
Oh, cool. Thanks, man.
No worries. So we'll play this footage. This is from Patrick Hilsman's personal recordings. But what was that?
Is it tiny for other people to see?
Well, yeah, I can go full screen, but then if I go full screen, it's difficult. Okay, I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I know how to do it.
You'll figure it out. It's okay.
There we go. I think I fixed it. Okay, here it is. Here is Patrick Hilsman's footage from the first Battle of Aleppo between 2014 and 2015. We'll just play some of it with audio, and then we'll mute it. We'll just have it playing in the background as we're talking.
2014.
Yeah, 2012 to 2014.
2014.
Yes, yes.
So this says there was an airstrike. Hold it for a sec. So yeah, there was an airstrike, and some of the rebel groups started, like, I assume, accusing people of being spotters, and it was like nonsense. It didn't make any sense, and they were just grabbing these kids that you see them pushing up against the hood of the car. So I tried to like film secretly to try and get as much footage as possible, and then our fixer actually started yelling at them and pulled his gun out, and just turn the sound back on.
But your fixer pulled his gun out on the rebels.
Yeah.
Is it okay for you to identify who the fixer is?
No, well, he's dead, but I don't want to. He's controversial, and
Okay, understood. Your fixer pulled out a gun on some rebels. Just your average afternoon, average Syrian afternoon. Understood.
Yeah, but they were fucking with people, so he was in the right here, I think.
Like I've been in a situation where guns are pulled out, and I understand the feeling of wanting one. Yeah, no, this is chaos. Man, it feels like a lifetime has passed since this, man. I mean, this is 2013, I was 12. I was 12 when this was happening.
Tu vois, il y a du feu là-haut. This was hit less than a minute ago, probably.
Hit less than a minute ago.
Get out.
No. Wait. Stay in the car. Stay in the car.
Stay in the car. Des blessés. Oh non, c'est affreux.
طالع بسرعة جيبها. Please, give it.
Ouvrez la porte. Pousse-toi.
So can you explain what's happening here? We'll go back and I'll play it again quickly, but Patrick's just dropped, of course, but we'll play it again for you guys, okay? So what's happening here is Patrick Hilsman is going to the site of an artillery strike, and a girl is being transported out and then brought into the back of the car for them to transport and get out of there. But no, like I was saying this earlier while Patrick Hilsman, before he disconnected, it feels like a lifetime since this footage was recorded. This was back in 2013. 2013. Again, I was 12 years old. I think playing Gary's mod with most of my free time at this point. Maybe Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 or something. There's been so much time, and the war's still going on. It's still as brutal as ever. And Aleppo's now getting bombed in the city center again. And there are, once again, civilian casualties now that it's been recaptured by the rebels. Hello, welcome back. We were just having a jolly conversation.
Worst building in the world.
What's the worst building in the world? Your building?
My building in New York is really bad. The management company has abandoned it. Like the heat's not on, the door doesn't open or close.
Been there, done that. Let's do one more of these clips and then we can talk about the modern goings on, because I'm having I'm having problems playing this on full screen, because when I go full screen, it's fucking matter.
Forget it. Just play it on small screen.
Okay, let's play.
Right.
Tell me what's going on here, okay?
Okay, this is after an airstrike in Aleppo in 2013. We were just driving up the street, and then we saw it go boom, and we assumed there'd be injured people, and this guy knows where the hospitals are, so we just pulled over, and they came with us, and we delivered her to a field hospital.
What type of injuries did the girl have?
You'll see.
Well, I would like. We can't show the injuries if there's blood or anything like that.
Okay. No. It's all right. She just had an injury to her leg. It won't be censored.
Okay. Well, you mean it won't be censored?
It won't be, no.
Well,
It won't violate rules.
It won't violate. Okay, got you. You're playing loose and fast with my livelihood, Patrick.
You'll be all right.
Okay. You've told me that many times, okay, when we were out there, and we were not all right. We were not all right, Patrick.
Well, I know. Well, what are you gonna do? Okay. Somebody's gotta keep the sheep calm,
Okay, so Patrick, I want to ask you about now, Aleppo. How did that battle transpire the first time? Because if you go back, the city is a patchwork of different control by different groups, and groups get encircled, and then evacuation deals are negotiated. I believe the regime got an evacuation deal at some point for its soldiers when they were encircled from Aleppo, and then they retook the city, and then etc. That battle went on last time for about 4 years. It was a 4-year-long battle.
But I mean, honestly, even crazier than that, because it's like, oh, is it still playing the clip?
Yeah, it's playing different footage. Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, that's me filming the regime positions from like a FSA sniper's nest.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty
spooky.
Cool. That is spooky.
It's insane. Yeah. And then I didn't know.
So the SAA, the Syrian Arab Army, which for reference is Assad's forces, they're in the building diagonal.
Directly ahead.
Yeah, it's directly ahead, diagonal. Yeah, got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that battle transpire, Patrick?
So basically in 2012, the rebels took over some of the border posts with Iraq and Lebanon, and they moved in and took over East Aleppo. And also, hang on, let me start from the beginning. There was a revolution in Syria that started with, the Arab Spring in 2011. Protest movement started, and then the regime started cracking down violently, arresting people, killing them. Ultimately, the army was deployed to shoot the protesters, and a lot of the members of the army basically refused orders, and that's how the Free Syrian Army was formed, because it was people that didn't want to follow orders from the Assad regime. So essentially, they started as refuseniks, which I think is actually a very important point, that they didn't start off really as an armed group. They started off as a group that was like, hey, we don't want to shoot people. And they ended up having to fight the regime to protect the protesters. And from there, obviously, foreign powers got involved. Turkey started trying to dissuade Kurdish groups from being close to the opposition, started trying to support groups that were more extreme and that would suit their agenda against the Kurds more broadly. And also, of course, you had foreign jihadists starting to come in. So by 2012, you had a situation where you had Free Syrian Army, and then you also had Jabhat Nusra on the ground, and you had several other coalition of Islamist groups, non-Islamist groups, Kurdish FSA groups, proto-YPG on the ground. So already you had this patchwork of different groups, which in what was loosely considered Free Aleppo. And naturally, as the Free Syrian Army took over the area, the regime started just bombing everything: hospitals, schools, anything that they could find as a target. And that lasted for years and years. But there's an important distinction that in 2013, 2013? In 2013, ISIS became so powerful during that time, rising to prominence at the same time as Jabhat Nusra, which is the Al-Qaeda wing. ISIS, in parallel to Jabhat Nusra, was becoming a very powerful force on the ground, known for being extremist, known for having a lot of suicide bombers, known for murdering their prisoners in very graphic ways, and also known for a lot of foreign jihadists joining them. I often say that the reason that ISIS was so effective on the ground is because a group like Jabhat Nusra is fighting to set up an Islamic State, one Islamic State, right? And a group like ISIS is fighting to bring on the apocalypse. They didn't really have an end game in the same way that other jihadist groups do.
Yeah,
and
Jabhat al-Nusra provided certain, not a lot, but small social services and food to starving communities.
Yes and no. I mean, and they also besieged others.
Well, yeah, but the point is, they made an attempt to build the trimmings of a state where other groups were too busy preaching their nonsense, or they were not interested as much as they were in doing that. In administration.
They preached their nonsense plenty, but they were more goal oriented, whereas ISIS was much more just about seeking martyrdom. It's just they were much more of an end game player, and as a result, they could always punch way above their weight. Because if you can just
I'm sorry, can we pause this for a moment? Let me just go back to the credits here that I just saw. Because I just saw a name in there, and I'm sorry, my screen's going a little crazy right now because I jolted. Can you tell me about who in this production piece that you've made, who Greg the Bear Jew Howowitz is exactly?
He's my best friend from childhood.
Oh, okay. Sounds like a good guy. I'd like to meet him.
He's a good guy.
Got you. Okay, 1 second. I do want to throw something out there for a second, because people talk about the reasons. Something I see recently, and it angers me quite a lot, is that there's a
Am I still on camera?
yeah, you're on camera. There's a revolution.
Oh, fuck.
There is a type of confrontation with state power somewhere. And immediately, what people do is they start looking at foreign backers, and they don't start looking at domestic concerns. And that's not to say that foreign backers can't not matter, but when people talk about Syria, they talk about Operation Timber Sycamore and the shuffling of some weapons as if that caused the Syrian civil war. When people look at the Cuban Revolution, or if they look at like certain red Marxist militia groups in Africa during the Cold War, they'll say, oh, the Cubans are the Soviets. No, it was, a lot of that was anti-colonial sentiment that bubbled up. And you just look at it completely through the geopolitical lens, as you were talking about earlier. Can you tell me, and tell people who might not be familiar, who Hamza al-Khattab was? The 14-year-old boy during the start of the revolution that helped inspire a lot of this.
Hamza al-Khatib he was a 14-year-old boy who I believe there was a group of kids that were sketching protest slogans on the wall of, I think, their school or a community center in their area, and one of the things that they wrote was, "Doctor, it's time for you to go," which is a reference to Assad. And the regime
Who was an eye doctor, for those who don't know.
Who's an eye doctor. And the regime cracked down by arresting a bunch of kids and beating the crap out of them. And I think at least one of them, I think more than one, but at least one, Hamza al-Khatib, was just like brutally murdered and tortured. And they returned his body to him very unceremoniously and like in a very grotesque way.
And they said that they would only give it back to the family if they quickly agreed to bury it.
Do that a lot. Yeah, so it was just an overt act of just trying to cover up a crime in broad daylight, and people weren't having it, so they started, attacking the police station, and they started protesting, and that's why they say that Dara is like the cradle of the revolution.
If I remember correctly, Atef Najib, which was Assad's cousin, not very well connected, but he was in charge of one of these police municipalities, and were arresting kids, and when their parents would come to confront them, he would basically tell them off. And I believe the quote that went around at the time, I don't think there's a recording of it, I don't know if it's true, but the word that went around is that Atef Najib, again, he's connected to the Assad family, probably thinks he's protected, said to the parents of these children, bring your wives, bring your wives so I can impregnate them, so you can have better kids than the ones who wrote all these slogans and such.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, there's no way to verify that, but that is their mentality. I mean, that is like Assad or we burn the country is one of the slogans that they use, and they're not kidding about it. So it's even if it could be apocryphal, it's still significant because stuff like that happens all the time. And the guy's death is not at all apocryphal. They absolutely documented.
Sorry, raise your voice a little bit. You're starting to cut out.
They absolutely murdered that kid, and it's totally well documented. Like there's no ambiguity about it.
So, Battle of Aleppo, Syrian civil war goes on. As time develops, a lot of regional powers get involved. The UAE, the United States, well, the United States is not a regional power, but the United States funnel weapons in through different operations. I know different Arab states as well. But for the Assad regime, and a lot of them through different rebel groups, the Assad regime, they got funneled weapons to them from the Iranians. They got funneled militias from Iraq, but of course Hezbollah from Lebanon. The Russians get involved. They started extremely brutal bombing campaign, famously bombing 4 hospitals in 12 hours after giving UN data not to bomb said hospitals, so they knew where they were. You're muted, by the way, so whatever you're saying, we're not hearing it.
They might have beat that record this week.
Did they beat that record of 4 hospitals?
I don't know if it's 12 hours, but I think they had 6. And it's crazy. The Russians only have limited resources in the country, and it's like they're basically just hitting hospitals. Like they don't know what else to do. They can't really use it. They don't have enough to really use it for like close air support, and they know that like they've already brought down 1 regime aircraft, and now they just took over a base that has a large number of anti-aircraft manpads. So the Russians are doing what they always do, which is bomb hospitals.
Sadly, doesn't surprise me. I mean, they just controlled Aleppo. They lose Aleppo, and within 2 days they're bombing the hospital. It's not like all their supporters left in that time. A lot of them did, but it just seems to be like a complete, of course, the usual lack of care for civilian casualties.
Yeah.
But the Russians and Iranians get involved. The Syrian civil war turns against the Free Syrian Army. They get pushed back eventually from Idlib. They get pushed out of Aleppo.
But you're missing a key part. In 2013, ISIS takes over the border with Turkey. In 2013, in September 2013, ISIS takes over the Bab al-Salama border crossing with Turkey and takes over several other border crossings. And that effectively cuts off Aleppo from the rest of the world. And it comes under ISIS dominance at that time. And for all of us journalists, that was like there were many times that I thought I would never, ever be able to go back there, or that none of my friends would ever be able to go back there. And it's like, it's been surprising how many times that's changed. Because when ISIS occupied it from 2013 till I believe early 2014, we thought that we'd never get back in there. And then in, I think, early 2014, there was a rebel counteroffensive against ISIS, and a whole group of other Islamist rebel groups teamed up and really kicked ISIS's ass and got them out of Aleppo province. And then they sort of fortified their position in Raqqa afterwards. And that's how Raqqa became what we call, what was colloquially called the ISIS capital. But of course, it's just the city where they went, a normal city with people that don't necessarily support them that they occupied. And so there was within the broader rebel conquest of Aleppo, there's the sub-war between the FSA and ISIS, which also happened.
Gotcha.
So that was an entirely different conflict. So Aleppo fell to ISIS. Aleppo was liberated by the rebels, then it fell to ISIS, then it was liberated by the rebels, then it fell to the regime in 2016. So that's basically the narrative.
After the regime picks up and pushes them out of Aleppo, the remnants of the Free Syrian Army mostly hold out in Idlib province within Syria, if not cross the border, flee the country, or go elsewhere. I know some went to Turkey, some went elsewhere. Idlib, since 2019, while it hasn't been quiet, in fact, while it has fallen out of the headlines, Idlib has been regularly bombed by the Assad regime for the last 5 years, intermittently, sometimes peaking up during like certain conflicts between groups, whatever. Point is that he's been bombing it quite regularly. I knew that Jolani of the HTS, which we'll get into who they are in a second, I know that these groups couldn't have been sitting there and doing nothing, but I didn't expect what I saw on the 24th. It really felt like it came from nowhere. Not only did it feel like it came from nowhere, the reports I was hearing at the time, I didn't talk about it because I just considered it rumors, was that the Assad regime was actually preparing for an offensive. The Assad regime was looking for was going to actually take up an offensive possibly into Idlib to try to clear out some territory. But I mean,
so many analysts were talking about that, like it was just on the brink of there being this massive offensive into Idlib. And I mean, that might have been the case, but I think that I think that probably wouldn't have turned out the way they thought it would, because a lot of this has to do with what racists that support the Israeli government call the demographic bomb, which is that to them they think that Palestinian citizens of Israel, I'm talking about like Likudniks here, think that Palestinian citizens of Israel are a demographic bomb because their birth rates are slightly higher than Jewish Israelis. So to them, they see it as a threat to Israel's Jewish identity because they see if people have too many kids, then there won't be as good a balance between Jews and Arabs. So they call that the demographic bomb. And in a way, a demographic bomb in Idlib played a huge role in this, because during the 2016 fall of Aleppo, the regime was still unable to basically claim it, even at the end, and they had to strike a deal with the rebels to have some people evacuated. And I remember being on the phone with one of my friends who's a filmmaker as she was besieged there, and you could just hear it, like I've never heard anything like that. Like, we've been in some shit before, but I've never, ever in my life been near anything like the sound of just large bombs being dropped from aircraft with no opposition 24/7, like it's a delivery service or something. And just on the audio, it was just terrifying. So people were evacuated from there. And of course, naturally, there were millions of people that were already displaced and living in the north throughout IDP camps in other countries. And effectively, by the time around 2018, when people said Assad is winning the war, yada, yada, the fact is that most of the population of pre-war Syria existed outside of the boundaries of his control. So while he had more territory than any other group, The fact is that more Syrians lived either in exile or the combination of Syrians in exile and in territory that he doesn't control, even at that point, was larger than the percentage in the territory that he controls. So he's been ruling over like a rump state in terms of population already.
So do you think that was? I mean, even if it was the rump state, it's not like there's about like 3 to 4 million people in Idlib, I would imagine. Something roughly around that side.
Jamie, look that up.
But Jamie, look that up. But it's certainly not larger than the amount of people that live in the Assad-controlled territory, and so
not in Idlib specifically.
Not in Idlib specifically. But Idlib is the one that's mainly pressing against the Assad regime. I mean, the SDF is pressuring near Deir ez-Zor now, but not initially during the breakthrough offensive. No. So it can't be simply just explained through demographic bombs or demographic is destiny, as Nick Fuentes might say, or something, you know?
No, it can't be explained through any one thing. But that being said, if you can't crush people, if they're going to fight you, they're going to fight you. Like, you know, you can't eradicate and crush people. The world is too complicated right now, and it's too advanced, and people have too many ways to try and get back what's theirs. And a lot of people were despairing. I always said this day would come. I really didn't think it would come this soon. Like I was shocked. I kept asking people, am I dreaming? And that's like a really, really like the best experience ever. I got to tell a Syrian that's been in the hospital for something that's not so bad. So they've been out of touch with the world for a couple days, and I got to tell them about what happened. And I said the FSA flag is about to be raised on the citadel of Aleppo, and they're like, oh, like, you know, they're thinking it's like somebody snuck up there or something, and they're like, well, what's going on? What's happening? I was like, no, like they took Aleppo, and they're like, what do you mean they took Aleppo? Like the countryside? What do you mean? I was like, no, the province.
The province, not even just the city. The province.
Province, yeah, and that's insane.
I mean, it happened so fast, so quickly. When I released my video about it, I think I called it 3 days to shock the world, or 3 days to shock Syria. It happened so fast. It happened so fast. I remember as I was doing the breakdowns of my show, the map continued to update as more neighborhoods, more villages, more stuff was getting captured. And I had to keep updating as the show was going on, these new captures. I haven't streamed through the weekend. I haven't even told people about how close Hama is like to falling now. It is. The rebels are near the city's gates. I don't know if it's going to fall. But
you never know, dude.
You never know. And especially since the Iranians seem to be, at least from their public media statements, scrambling Iraqi PMF forces and other forces to try to reinforce and try to stop the bleeding. They're not going to be able to take back Aleppo. They're not going to be able to like push back and take back, push in the Idlib and crush. They're not going to be able to do that. But stopping the bleeding, who knows? Who knows? My point is, though, the point is, right now the Assad regime is in a really, really bad place. 8 days ago, they weren't in that really, really bad place. It didn't feel like they were in that really, really bad place. And so my question is, was the Assad regime always teetering, or is there recent circumstances that has led them to be extra vulnerable? Is it Julani has built up in the HTS a significant fighting force in Idlib province? Is it that Assad having the Hezbollah militias distracted with Israel and the Russian air power distracted in Ukraine, unable to reinforce his lines with Russian air power, which helped save him back in 2013? Or what would you say?
I'll give you one example. I could be mistaken, but I think that there was the artillery school that was taken in this offensive, the military base. It could be a different one, so I'm not positive, but I think that was the site of a big battle in 2016 when Nusra. Do you remember this? They burned a lot of tires. The activists in Aleppo made a smoke screen out of tires so that the fighters could slip in 2016.
Yeah,
it was the counteroffensive to try.
Yeah, some people tried to say it was like air defense, kind of, but that was always crap. But yeah, I remember.
Oh, I mean, it probably would have made it. They probably would have camouflaged something.
The vaguest of air defense. It's like, but it's not like, oh, where's if you're in Aleppo and you've got these giant buildings, right, and a million different people, many of them informants, it's hard to like use a bunch of time. Point proven. I get you. I get what you're saying. I know what you're talking about.
But when that happened, there was a significant battle at one of the Assad military bases when HTS took it over, and like it was really fucking impressive. Like they really did an incredible push to take over this fortified facility, and they had it, but the Russians just obliterated it with bombs. And at the end of the day, there was nothing they could do because Russia had a very consistent like schedule of aircraft taking off from Hmyman base and then coming out to bomb Aleppo, and they just did it in shifts, 24/7. With Israeli provided four-post drones providing the surveillance. So they didn't even have to use aircraft to spot their targets. They could have a persistent drone above the battlefield at all times. And so with that circumstance, they were able to easily repel like counteroffensives from the rebels. So there's no way that attrition in Ukraine hasn't contributed to
so you would say
there's no way.
that the Russians being distracted in Ukraine, to say the least, has contributed to this fallback.
As not at all military analyst, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I know you're not a military analyst, but it's impossible. You don't need to be a Look, what was it Bill Barr used to say? Like, if you see a helicopter upside down in a tree, you don't need a pilot to know something's wrong. Like, I don't need to be a military analyst to know that the Russians aren't bombing as much as they used to in Syria. I'm just not seeing the reports of what it used to be. It's not the bombing is not as destructive because it's just not bombing as much.
They're going after soft targets exclusively, whereas they used to just. I mean, they've always gone after soft targets. They've always bombed hospitals. It's like.
Has it been exclusively? They haven't hit any military targets. I'm sure they have.
No, I'm sure they have too. But what I'm saying is that it's disproportionately. It's almost all civilian shit. Like they're really.
I've seen the bombing in Aleppo. It's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost all. It was always almost all civilian shit. But the point is that they were also hitting like their opponents. And this time, it looks like they can't seem to be able to mobilize it.
So I want to go through this map quickly with you, and I know map time is it can be a little aggravating, but I want to do this even if it's a little boring because I want to give people a sense of perspective of exactly how much territory has been overtaken in this time. 1 second, it's gonna be. 1 second, let me see if... No, it turns it gray. I gotta think of a way to do this that works. So, you can see here that the rebels, for those in chat, the rebels used to control that green box on the left-hand corner there. You see that green area around Idlib? It's to the left there. There's like a green outline. That green outline right there is what they used to control. Everything to the right of that, including Aleppo, this area to the south. This is all stuff that has been captured within the last 8 days. This is all stuff that has been captured within the last week and going into this week. So they have more than doubled the total territory that Hayat al-Sham controls and its associated militias. And we're just talking about Hayat al-Sham right now. We could also talk about the SDF, which, if we move over here, the SDF has also, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the United States aligned military force that we use to fight ISIS. They have pushed across the villages and towns that are across the border across the river near Deir ez-Zor, across the Euphrates. And interestingly, they even took the town of Qashm, which is where the Wagner Group launched the famous assault of Qashm back in 2018, the Battle of Qashm, where they tried to assault SDF positions and got murked by American bombers for like a full day. I mean, the Assad regime is getting pressed by two sides here, not to mention with the fact that ISIS is also trying to, of course, take advantage of the opportunity. Syria seems to be seeing violence on every front again. It isn't, I guess when I thought about the Syrian civil war, like reigniting, I thought it would be regional and then slowly expand. But it was, it was Aleppo, then it was the SNAs attacking the Kurds, then it was the Kurds are attacking the regime near Deir ez-Zor. It seems like Syria is just like straight back on fire again. You're muted. You muted yourself. You censored yourself.
Okay, so let's drop the geopolitical analysis and let's go to Star Wars metaphors. like, the regime is like the Empire kind of, and like the HTS is like, I don't know, like Boba Fett or Jabba the Hutt, like some lesser villain. Like, it's just the source of the most death tends to be what's driving a war. Like the occupation of Gaza, like I get it, Hamas is fucked. There's a million other bad actors there, but if you take away the Israeli occupation, it will get better. And it tends, so in any of these situations, it tends to be that the player that holds the most people prisoner and that is causing the most death and destruction, the player that has the Air Force is usually the one that's like the deadliest. And if you remove that factor, sometimes it's very good for peace building.
So, I also want to say that these assaults, while the Battle of Kashan was famous for U.S. air power being used to kill Russian Wagner mercenaries, these assaults near Deir ez-Zor were also assisted by American air power. Let me see if I can bring these videos up.
Yeah, that footage is nuts. That footage is insane.
It's hard to believe. Actually, it's hard to really contemplate. But here is footage of U.S. troops U.S. troops in an aircraft bombing Russian-backed SAA, the Syrian Arab Army positions for our Kurdish allies. 1 second. Let me full screen this and... 1 second, I didn't play it. It's hard to do this on Discord, do this full screen stuff on Discord. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
There it is. It's American bombing.
Is that phosphorus?
I'm not particularly sure. I don't think
Looks like it.
It might be. Here's the thing that's Here's the thing that's unrecognized. No one can deny what this is, okay? Every red-blooded American knows that sound. A-10 Warthog.
I've never heard that sound.
You've never heard that sound? You've never heard the brrrr? You've never heard the burt?
Not from that.
Oh, okay, well. Anyway, American air power is involved. We're supporting the Kurdish offensives. The Syrians are on the offensives. So it really...
They're all Syrians.
Yeah, they're all Syrians, but they're different factions. The FSA, the Free Syrian Army, the Syrian Arab Army, they're the Syrian Defense Force. Then you got the Syrian National Army.
Syrian Democratic. Okay, sorry. You want me to name all the groups and then go? Yeah. Syrian Arab Army regime.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. You have the Syrian Arab Army, which is the regime. You have HCS, which is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the Nusra. Then you have SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the Kurdish group. And then you have SNA, Syrian National Army, which is the bitches of Turkey. And and then you have
unbiased opinion. What do you think of the Turks, Patrick?
Say again?
What do you think of the Turks, Patrick?
No comments.
Okay.
No, they're fine. It's nice.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's a nice place to go, and
it's a nice place to visit. It's nice people, but it's like the government's very, very messed up right now.
Nice place to get juice.
It has kind of a weird Turkey. It's like a weird vibe where it's like kind of like if Hitler won the war and everything was named after him. It's like Hitler International Airport. Like it's just like this complete like disassociation from like the atrocities of like your civilization in the past. Like it's really, really weird.
Okay, you couldn't have said that in a more let's just say,
way.
Yeah, you couldn't have said that in a whatever. This is the DylanBurns TV show. We broadcast undistilled opinions. Okay.
No, that's right.
So all these armies are on offensive at the same time. It seems that they're all fighting quite rapidly after the start of this offensive. Would you say that this is how it was always likely going to go? That like once the match has been lit, that everything was going to go all at once? Is it surprising you how this went, where it's not just one group going on offensive and one group defending, but it's everyone fighting all at the same time?
Well, yeah.
Has this surprised you in any way?
No, obviously not, because it's like it's the regime is a house of cards. Even the Kurds were working with them, which I think wasn't right, but it was in a lot of situations where, to them at least, the way that they justified it was that it was to deter a Turkish invasion, and also to deter the Assad regime from actually invading them. Because if they're going to collaborate with them, it gives an incentive for them not to invade. And I would also argue that they were never really that genuine about cooperation, because there's always been clashes. Obviously, you had the clashes between the Wagner group and Kurdish groups, so it's not like it's been all wine and roses with these two groups. But one thing that's interesting is if you go to Kamishli, when I was there, a lot of the people that you talk to with the Kurdish groups will say that they've really, for years, really wanted to take these people out, because it's just a pain in the ass. And the ones that supported having the regime remain in place along the border generally actually don't really like the regime at all. It's just they saw it as strategic. So, I mean, I really hope that the Kurdish rights are respected and that there can be some kind of agreement. But there's always been this desire to get them the fuck out of there, like all along. So I'm not in the slightest bit surprised by that. And I also think it's important to remember that this is kind of like, yeah, Nusra is definitely rising from this. HTS is definitely rising. But I think and I hope that Nusra understands that they cannot overthrow Assad alone. Like, Dara is not, they don't control a place like Dara. They don't control a place like Sueda. The religious minorities are not going to want their rule. And there's a lot of places in the country where realistically, I don't think that if Assad falls, they're going to want to fight a war with Sueda or Deir ez-Zor. I hope that they're going to want to have a transition government. And if that's the case, maybe we could see a scenario like Lebanon, which is not ideal, but it's like, even when Hezbollah was a pain in the ass, Lebanon is still better than like Assad Syria. It's still better to have this insane jihadist group that's kind of like they're going to open up clubs and then their kids will be like potheads and that's more of that's kind of like the Lebanese.
I don't feel like a lot of Westerners, or I mean, I guess people outside of, if you're Lebanese, you know this. There are so many Hezbollah drug users.
Yeah, more like drug traffickers.
No, both.
But yeah, both. Yeah, definitely both. But I mean, it's an area that's always had a long history with drug smuggling and with people using illicit substances to export. During the war, there was a lot of legends about people like fighting for drugs and drug disputes during the war. But it's not. I don't want to like write it off as a druggy culture. Like the whole world is smoking weed, and that's basically what people do there too.
Okay, well, yeah, I wouldn't want to insult Hezbollah either. So let's get to the Hama area. So obviously, due to what Hafez did to that city, and due to the fact that much of the early protests were in Hama, a lot of the early massacres, again, were in Hama. And of course, there were fighting over the area. What is the significance of this location to the Syrian civil war? And what would it mean for it to be recaptured by the rebels? As we can see, the rebels are at the gates of the city, from both along the M5 highway and from, I think, like, it really looks like the northeast and northwest. And it looks like they're trying to expand so they can be attacking the city from three sides. What is the significance of this war to the history of the revolution, the civil war, and what would it mean if it was captured?
We talked about before, in 1982, there was an uprising by the Muslim Brotherhood in Hama, and the regime of Hafez al-Assad bombed Hama to smithereens and killed tens of thousands of people. And so it's the massacre at Hama is a very important touchstone in the history of Syrian resistance, because they see it as emblematic of what the regime can do. And what Hafez al-Assad did in Hama is kind of like the blueprint for what Bashar al-Assad did. So that's like the historical perspective. And what could happen if it falls is that clears the road for Homs. And also, in Homs, the population there really, really dislikes the regime on average. And you can't deny that there would be some popular support for the rebellion reaching Homs, like a lot. And so it is kind of like the gates of, it unlocks the gates to the south. Put it that way.
The thing I really that I think really probably scares the Kremlin too, is the fact that the Russians are in Syria for a few reasons, but one that is undisputed is their naval base in Tartus. They have a naval base there, but it was recently announced that it was actually evacuated. I don't know if you knew this, But as
I don't
of
know.
today, their flotilla force has departed there as of yesterday, but we're finding this out for the first time from pictures released today, and
Hang on,
this
sorry,
has been reiterated that they are evacuating some Navy ships from Syria. Whether or not they're going to evacuate, they've evacuated all of them, or they've just evacuated a large proportion of them. There is some evacuations there.
Wait, so there's
Yes.
satellite images of it. It's somewhat confirmed.
If you look here, you can see there's the picture, and then you can see here. This is from General Electric Aerospace. The Russian Navy's base at Tartus in Syria is crucial to its support of the Assad regime and its mission on the world stage. The dramatic shift in the frontline Syria now puts the base at risk. There are indications that Russia may be evacuating naval bases. The Russian base at Tartus in Syria appears under imminent threat as Syrian civil war turns against the Assad regime. As the front line draws closer, Russia is already taking precautions. Russia currently has 5 naval ships and a submarine base in Tartus. These comprise 2 Gorshkov-class frigates, etc., 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 etc. But you can see the pictures here. They've departed.
Yeah, man. Wow. That's fucking nuts.
So the ships that have lost are 3 frigates, 1 improved Kilo, and 2 auxiliary ships.
So that's Death Star 1. Hamaimim is Death Star 2.
I mean, I could think of it like this way, because I'm trying to be conservative here, okay? As a very conservative man of
you're famous for your conservativeness.
People,
Conservatively.
I often yell many homophobic slurs at Patrick to reiterate it to him.
Well, I mean, okay. Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Okay.
About Dylan's homophobic abuse.
Yes, I mean, look, my staff is aware of it. You're aware of it. Many people are aware of it. But I'm not changing, and I don't care what cancel culture says. I believe
Assad's going down, cancel culture.
I hate the gays because I deserve all of the men. Anyway, I could look at it like this: the Russians have lost a lot of ships in the Black Sea Fleet. They just took their staff from their only semi-functioning, and I'm using semi-functioning very graciously here, aircraft carrier. They turned them into a military unit and sent them over to Ukraine. Do they want to really be losing ships in the Mediterranean right now? Is it a worse story to quietly evacuate this and then return the ships closer back once it's clear that the rebels are not only not going to take Tartus, but they're not going to get close enough to bomb the ships with drones or other munitions and then move them back at a later date so they don't have the humiliation of losing these ships when they can't exactly build new ones readily?
Jeez, I don't know. Like, I don't know what they'll do. And I also don't know what kind of capacities they have, because I gotta assume that that base probably has the normal stuff to interdict attacks, and it probably has a lot of jamming, and like I assume it's high tech, well defended. So I don't know what the capacity for the rebels.
We assume, and that's important part is that we assume, because the Russians gutted Kaliningrad with troops to send them to Ukraine. They took air defense systems from the east to send them to Ukraine. We really don't know. I mean, they're not bombing as much as they used to. So if they diverted something from Syria,
and also,
we know, so
also rebels have penetrated Hamaimim with drone attacks many, many, many times. So if there's actually, interestingly enough, there's a Call of Duty mission in the 2019 one that's 100% ripped from the Hamaimim assault. But in that version, it's the Kurds and they win. But so this time I guess it's Nusra, and we'll see what happens. But it's like they basically had these essentially hobby drones, like very different from the quadcopters that you'd think. Basically little model airplanes, and they would set them up to fly on a very, very long path, and then like tilt precisely the correct coordinates, and tilt back, and then continue flying, and then drop a bomb on the airbase. So it was like this weird, low-tech, automated bombing run. So it's very strange. It's almost like it's almost like a fucked up version of like a Disney movie. It's like people are bombing a real air force with like toy planes. You know?
It's like Toy Story's Revenge or something.
Yeah, Toy Story, like the Nusra version.
Buzz, you're gonna miss the truck. I'm not headed for the truck. Hits the airbase. Anyway, look. So right now, I gotta say, the Russians don't seem to be too happy. The Assad regime is obviously not very happy. How do you measure Assad's decision to immediately go to Russia? Just leave the country,
I don't
hightail
think it was related.
and go to. You don't think it was related at all to the violence
I
in
don't
the
think
country?
so. What hadn't he left already?
I believe it was after, but I honestly, in all the hubba about it, Assad goes to Russia. And even if he did, has he returned to Syria?
Allegedly, he's returned. And I think there are photos of him having returned to Syria. But again, like I don't know. That might have not been super smart. Yeah, we'll have to see. But again, there's no indication whatsoever that there's like any plan at all for these groups to be able to take on the capital. Like, there's not much. There's allegedly been some fighting between HTS sleeper cells and like some regime troops inside of Damascus. And I'm sure that a ton of people in Damascus are just itching to take the government out. But there haven't been. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay. I don't expect Damascus to fall anytime soon. But I mean, like, the fact that we're even, like, vaguely hinting at, like, is that a possibility? The conversation has shifted so immensely from where it was before, where the questions was about, what Turkey can do to keep Idlib alive, and what Turkey's going to be doing, mostly fighting. Like, most of the talk around the Syrian civil war up to this point is, when is the Turks going to invade Syria again? When are the Turks going to invade and push out more communities from the border regions? That's how most people have been talking about it. So this is all so surreal. This is so hard for me to really process. Have you had difficulty processing this, Patrick? You're muted once more. Always muted, Patrick.
Completely. It feels like I'm dreaming. Like, it's nuts. Like, it feels like a dream and like a nightmare, and just it's fucking crazy. Like, I never thought that it would happen like this fast. What I thought would happen would be that a lot of those kids that were refugees would want to fight, and a lot of people that were pissed off about their parents being killed would get drafted into the military. And what I thought was that eventually somebody is going to get into their army and take a shot at Assad. That's like kind of how I envisioned him going down. I didn't think that there'd be like a military offensive. Like, that's fucking nuts.
So, what's the... now I think we need to break down... Okay. Neither of us like Assad. I think that's both clear from our speech during this, or our
so
talking
much.
during this. We don't like Assad. But let's talk about who the rebels are. Because they're mostly just referred to, and I refer to them to make it simple, as the rebels. I usually refer to them as the rebels. Sometimes I'll like throw HTS or Hayatir al-Sham in the segment to make sure people know who's the most dominant rebel faction in Idlib. A no holds barred at this point.
English, relax.
Hayatir al-Sham is the one that started this. They're a big Hayatir al-Sham supporter. They don't want to hear us critique them.
No, she hates.
No, it's too. I saw it in their eyes. They love Hayatir al-Sham. Hayatir al-Sham is the one that really sparked all this. Who are Hayatir al-Sham, and who is Jolani, their leader?
So Jolani was part of the insurgency against the United States, and I think that he was
Iraq.
actually in the Zawahiri. Yeah,
As part of Al-Qaeda.
and I think he was as part of Al Qaeda in Iraq.
Yes.
And that's essentially the ISIS flag as we know it is from Al Qaeda in Iraq. And so that's why, a lot of conspiracy theorists will post images of like a U.S. soldier in 2005 holding an exact ISIS flag, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, proof that America created ISIS." But it's a symbol that was adopted by the Zarqawi group.
Yeah,
And
or you hear somebody like, or see recently, like people are reposting like, "Oh, look at this guy with the ISIS flag." It's like, that's not an ISIS flag. It's the banner of the Prophet or whatever. It doesn't matter. But continue. I'm getting my niche.
But it is
Like,
it's not necessarily an ISIS flag, but the people that wear it are universally pretty much always
radical
similar.
Salafists. They're also Salafists, usually. Salafist Islamists.
Usually, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so Hayat Tahrir al-Sham started as it started with Jolani, who was a member of the Zarqawi group. I believe it was Zarqawi, Al Qaeda in Iraq, and he was actually captured by the Americans, and he was held at I think it was God, what are some of the detention
He
centers
was
now?
held in like 5 or 6 prisons. I think at one point he might have even been held at Abu Ghraib.
Okay, yeah. So he was basically obviously fucked with by the Americans and the post-Saddam government. And
Are those donuts on your pajamas?
yeah, they are.
You're a big donut guy?
Not really. I can't eat a lot of them.
You
But,
fucking poser.
So Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, it started with Jelani in the Iraqi insurgency, and then he was in American prison camps, eventually got released, and started sending fighters from the insurgency in Iraq, who were veterans of the insurgency, into Syria to try and form an Al-Qaeda affiliate. And that's how it got started. So it basically, people talk about blowback in a way that I think is sometimes stupid. Like they think that, I don't know, like they think that because they think that if they see one U.S. weapon somewhere, it means that the United States necessarily supported something. When the fact is that U.S. weapons are traded by third parties all the time.
I hear this all the time because, like, they'll say that Operation Timber Sycamore was an operation to. I remember I was giving some talk at UMD about, I think it was Rojava actually, and one of the first questions I got was like, didn't America fund ISIS? Didn't we give them all the weapons or whatever? And they don't know. There's like when you drop weapons in a crazy ass civil war zone, those weapons are people are gonna die, people are gonna capture them, people are gonna use, and they're gonna trade hands. Some of the air shipments are not gonna fall where they need to fall. Stuff like that happens. And I'm not condoning the failures. I'm just saying that that's what happens in civil wars, and it's different than directly funding a terror group.
Well, yeah, but in this case, it's blowback just by pissing people off so much. Like, it's the fact that we had torture centers running under our eyes in Iraq, and that we, I'm somebody, I also don't believe in that whole myth about debathification having been a bad thing. I think there were a lot of factors. Like, we did a lot of stuff to piss off people. Like, our troops were not necessarily super disciplined, and a lot of incidents happened that were going to piss off the locals no matter what.
Let me break this down for a second, because I don't know, I think I still buy the lie a little bit. Okay, if you take everybody who's working in positions,
I'm not saying it's totally false. I'm not saying it's totally false.
Okay, I got you.
Definitely a factor.
Yeah, I think people overemphasize it. They're like, we should have just kept the regime basically in power, just kicked out the main guy. Like, I think, like, obviously that's wrong, but I think we were a little over eager.
Like, firing the army completely was abysmally stupid.
They all have their guns. What are they going to do? What did they think was going to happen?
Yeah. But debathifying is not stupid. Like, it's the regime is hated, so you can't really, like, you can't move forward without somewhat purging the remnants of the old guard. It's just not going to happen. But so anyways, so like Jelani was in American prison, and you could say in a way that it's blowback because the United States invaded Iraq, tortured a bunch of people, had these horrible detention centers. That's how Jelani ended up coming from Syria to fight in the insurgency. And then in about 2012, the Nusra group started forming, and more recruits started going in and out of Syria. You could see them driving around with their cars. A lot of them had like these shaved heads. They didn't smoke.
But you would see them around. You would see the Al Nusra guys driving around.
Oh, absolutely.
What were their vibes like?
Very scary and unapproachable.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I was expecting, but
at some point when we were in Aleppo in 2013, it was like in February there was a week when Nusra just turned on all the civic institutions in the city. So they started. There was like a mix of. I think it was a mix of Islamic law and Syrian common law was the agreement that the revolutionaries had at first. So it was like a mix of Islamic and secular law, and that was how they had it. But effectively, because the city was just being bombed constantly, that ended up never really even functioning. So Nusra took over the quote-unquote revolutionary court, which was across the street from where I was staying. And it was nuts because, we just wake up one morning and there's these guys. They dress in black. They're like goth kids with beards. And they're just moving around, scratching their asses, carrying RPGs, big machine guns, like the LMG, like whatever the Russian version of a squad automatic weapon is. And just sitting there, like, looking at us. And I'm sure they knew that it was a media center and that there were French people there. And right at that point, they were super into kidnapping French citizens because that France had intervened in Mali against Al-Qaeda groups there. And Nusra was allied to Al-Qaeda. So it was really scary. And they were just there. And the weirdest thing is that they just were completely disinterested in us at that point. So it's like there's this group there that knows that like that is an Al Qaeda offshoot, and they're just kind of like staring at you.
It's kind of
being weird.
There is something funny about the idea of like, do you want to kidnap Patrick? No, not Patrick. Give me a different French bed.
God forbid, man. Come on.
I know. It's good that you didn't get kidnapped. It's good we didn't blow up in Ukraine. It's good. But now that it's done, we can joke about it. But
fun.
Unless they're gonna come to your apartment. I hope not. That'd be strong determination. They've waited 12 years for this moment.
You never know.
I do want to ask, when it comes to Jolani and HTS. So they're Al Nusra. They're part of Al Qaeda. They're part of. Well, they're not part of Al Qaeda. They're part of ISIS. Then they have this break with ISIS after Baghdadi declares ISIL and tries to absorb them after they have really gained some ground. They break off from ISIS, which at the time was ISI, became ISIL after expanded into Syria. Then they break ties and they
ISIL is just a different way of saying. ISIL is just a different way of saying ISIS.
Isn't it like
it's just
ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS? But
it's not. It's the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham.
I could have sworn
Sham means Levant.
Sham means Levant.
I promise you.
Okay, that's fine. I just remember it being referred to ISI before, and then it being referred to as ISIS afterwards. So it made me like.
Correct.
So that's why I was like, it became ISIS once it expanded into Syria. But
and then it became fashionable to call it
Daesh. At that point, they break with ISIS. Why did they break with ISIS? Why did what is now Hayatir al-Sham, but at the time was al-Nusra, and part of ISIS, was an ISIS affiliate. Why did they break with them?
Well, I mean, obviously part of it was the fact that ISIS was making a lot of headlines with their brutality. Like, Nusra was doing stuff like suicide bombings. Like, they were definitely killing, torturing people, fucking with activists. Like, they did it all. It's the same kind of vibe to a certain degree. But ISIS was like I said, like, end game people. Like, they really just were there for, like, the, you know, with other jihadist groups, it's like, come for the jihad, stay for the caliphate. Whereas for them, it's just like, jihad, baby. And, like, they really, calling it a state is, like, a very postmodern interpretation of, like, what a state is. And they just were more fanatical, less. I mean, they're obviously disciplined. People that are willing to, like, fight in a graveyard while they're freezing to death, or, like, you know, hide out in holes in the desert for years are obviously not, like, they're not undisciplined. But there's this kind of, like, school shooter-esque vibe to them that made them really effective and also made them fail, ultimately. Yeah. And there were even weird instances where sometimes they would have hostages and then kill them and, like, piss off the world and then not even make a demand. Like, it was just like insane. Like, you could never imagine. And also the way they attacked Kobani was, like, almost nonsensical because they just hurled people at it. And they already had access to the Turkish border. It wasn't necessarily, like, you know, going to win them the war to take out this city. But they just are very fanatical about. They set out their goals and then they do it. And
well, when you believe God's on your side, how can you lose a battle?
I guess, but it's when Bush was president, he would always say they hate us for our freedom, and I always thought that was kind of, like, reductive and stupid, and I still do. But when it comes to, like, ISIS, they're the closest thing to, like, the cartoonish villain of the person that just really wants to be evil and chooses to. It's like a school shooter vibe, you know.
So they make this break with ISIS. They fight against them. They fight against them. They start fighting against ISIS. I heard a lot of it was also financial. And of course, he wanted to dominate Jolani's group. Jolani, of course, wanted to keep control. It wasn't all just because, oh, guys, you guys are just too offensive. That's why we're going to go join Al Qaeda, you know? And that's what they did. They went and they became an Al Qaeda affiliate right after.
No, they were already an Al Qaeda affiliate.
I think they were ISIS and Al Qaeda affiliate at the same time. From what I was aware is that they swore loyalty to Al Qaeda after breaking with ISIS to get their support.
It's very complicated because it's a lot of this is
the Syrian civil war is. I'm sorry. No, there's advice to everybody home. Don't even bother breaking down the groups. Don't even bother bringing down the timelines. Don't even bother going through the history and watching this group change into this group, this group change into this group. No. Don't listen to this propagandist. This Syrian propagandist. It does. It next to does not matter. Just understand the big ones and understand the general changes, and that's more than enough. Okay, you do not need to see how what group merged into this, merged into this, and eventually became the SNA. They know, like the groups made like 500 people. It's not necessary. You don't need to do it to understand the Syrian civil war. You're gonna lose the normies in the minutia, Patrick.
Okay, so the ISIS Nusra thing kind of is like, think of it as Jolani group and Baghdadi group. That's probably the best way to put it. And they both were loosely under they were both in the Iraqi insurgency, and they both were loosely under Al Qaeda loyalty when they started. You could argue that Nusra spawned out of ISI, essentially. And then you could also argue that ISIS spawned then subsequently out of Nusra. You could. But again, these have always been like different groups, different centers of power, different thinkers. So it's kind of a blob and always has been. So it's a chicken and the egg thing.
Okay.
ISIS. But they're there. Nusra is significantly less crazy than ISIS, basically.
Okay, so.
But really vile. Like I have a personal friend that they killed. Like it's just like extremely vile. It's as bad as you could think.
Al Nusra.
Within the confines of a group that like wants to win and like actually exist in the world, it's pretty fucking bad.
Gotcha. So it goes from Al Nusra, goes to the Jabhat al Nusra, that eventually becomes Hayat al-Sham. Well, it was
Jabhat just means front.
But it was al Nusra, Jabhat al Nusra. That is true. It's basically the same thing. But it was Jabhat al Nusra separated from ISI, its own thing now. And I remember they did read it. I'm gonna put a stick in this. I'm pretty sure they redeclared some loyalty to one of the head of the Al Qaeda leaders at the time. I'll have to double check this after this. This is all a blob, and it's been like fucking 12, 13 years. Anyway, they then move on in their own thing now. Hayat al-Sham. What is Hayat al-Sham in reference to what it was before when it was al-Nusra? What is this shift? What does it mean? Does it mean anything? Has it changed any more recently?
Yes. I think in 2018, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the name and the group, comes from Nusra wanting to distance itself from Al-Qaeda. So I think in 2018, Jolani put out like a fatwa or statement saying, it's very funny actually if you look it up. It's basically like, thank you for your service, thank you for, thanks for dinner, but I don't know if I'm going to have the sex. And but they basically were like, we want to thank Al-Qaeda for their service in like the name of jihad, but we have decided that now we are no longer associated with them, and we're going to do our own thing. So they put out that fatwa or that statement, and then they re-announced we're now Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which, to be fair, did include groups that were not Nusrat. So it formed an alliance. And the purpose of that alliance, I think they started in 2016 when it started being called that.
2016 and 2017.
The purpose of that was to let me look it up. The purpose of that was to basically make it so that they were acceptable for outside support from places like Turkey or the Gulf, because ISIS already had a terrible reputation, and everybody knows what Al Qaeda is. So part of that had to do with their
branding.
Plans to become branding and their plans to become significant. So they I think it was HTS at the time that it did the 2016 Aleppo counterattack, and I'm positive that during the Idlib attacks when they gained ground in Idlib in 2018, it was also the HTS coalition.
Okay.
So they were basically formed for a different phase of the war with different political considerations.
Now, I remember there was this film released back in 2021 called The Jihadist. I don't know if you watched it. It's a PBS documentary. They interviewed Jolani for this piece called The Jihadist, and it seemed like at the time he was trying to make like a full media blitz. He wanted to convince the world that they had changed and they were in favor of Islamic law with a friendly face. They're going to treat all the minorities well. They're going to, you know, there's no torture is something that he would constantly tell the reporters, even though there's many documented instances of torture. But there was this branding shift, and that's obvious. But my question to you is there any actual behavioral shift? And I'm not saying, are these guys now Greenpeace? That's not my question. My question is there any change that would indicate that Jolani is interested in making a state that can survive in that region in Syria that isn't as brutal as Al-Qaeda, as brutal as al-Nusra was, and as brutal as the regime before it?
Like again, like my statement on everything has to be who knows.
Yeah.
But some positive signs. They seem to be talking, at least to the SDF. So if, like I said before, that if somewhere between like kind of a weird personality cult version of communism for SDF, and then on the other side, Al-Qaeda light with HTS, so like maybe somewhere in between that is democracy. Like just maybe the only way for it to be functional is for it to kind of be like a real truce like Lebanon had.
I'm a jihadist. You are a Marxist. Together we form democracy. Like it's just like
that's not what I don't. It's not a fucking kumbaya thing. I'm just saying out of just how sheerly annoying it would be to have any other system. You know, out of how fucking annoying it would be to have a coalition of SDF and HTS rule, makes me hope that people will be like, yeah, that's not going to fucking work. Let's just have elections. You know, like I really hope that that's what it's going for. And again, that they're behaving as if they know that they can't do it completely on their own. Those other cities are not going to want to be a part of their governing philosophy. And so if they want peace, if they want the war to end and Assad to go, they're going to have to accept other groups running their own affairs according to secular law. Like they can't, if they try to impose it on the other groups will want to resist. So if they're smart,
makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, they seem like the whole philosophy is that they want to turn Syria into a Islamic state, into an Islamic state. But like Syria is Syria, right? Jolani was displaced from the Golan Heights as a child, if I remember correctly. So like
I don't know about that.
He was displaced with his family from the Golan Heights from the 1967 invasion, if I remember correct. And I forget it was 1967, but the point is he used to live in Golan Heights. He no longer lives in the Golan Heights. So when he was a child. I think that he has some attachment to the idea of establishing this everywhere. I don't think it's practical. I agree with you. It's just, this war has not necessarily always been one for practicality. Out of the jihadist groups, he has been the one to show the most strategic acumen. And the fact that he's still alive after all of this probably, says something about Jolani's like tactical acumen to some degree. But I don't know. He's very spooky. He's very spooky. If you were part of ISI at any point, or if you're part of ISIS at any point, you're part of Al-Qaeda at any point, believing that you've changed now, like he releases a YouTube apology video and he's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you could picture a PR person like writing it. Yeah. But I mean, the honest truth is that there has been changes in behavior, but there's still. I mean, they beheaded a guy. Like they're on the way to Aleppo. Like they're still what they are. You know, so but positive signs are that it does seem that they're letting the Christian districts go about their business normally. I've seen watch the videos of after Duma was taken by the regime and how interviews are conducted with witnesses and how terrified the people are there, like how just utterly frightened they are. And then you see the interviews that were conducted in Christian neighborhoods of Aleppo. I'm sure some people are really fucking scared, and I'm not trying to minimize that in the slightest, but it did seem like less of the vibe of like, you know, Duma has fallen and you got to get out of here or you're gone forever. Like it did have a more. I can't go on vibes though for saying a jihadist group is going to behave well.
Yeah.
Like it's very.
For me, the first test really is how this offensive is conducted, how they treat the civilians after they capture these locations, what type of discipline they have. because I know the SNA is already engaged in some looting. There's this video going around. I don't know if you know anything about it. I haven't done any digging into it. Have you seen the Christmas tree video where there's a Christmas tree and it gets torn down? And I know there's some versions that are like from Iraq that people keep posting that are not the most up-to-date ones. But I believe there is one that is possibly actually from Aleppo. But I heard that they put the tree up like hours later. HTS might have. I forget.
Yeah, they put it back.
Yeah.
They put it back. But again, that's PR. Their messaging matters, and how people perceive it matters, and how they'll govern matters. So all of that is important. But I fucking hope that what we're seeing is the fall of Assad as opposed to just the rise of Jelani. Because to me, the best case scenario is something like where Hezbollah was during, and I'm not, fuck Hezbollah. I'm not trying to apologize for them, but the best case scenario might be something like what there was in Lebanon after the war, where the groups just understood that it was too costly for them to have any other system except for basically consensus, or agreement via general consensus of the population.
Here's a question. And I know that I already know what your answer is probably going to be, but I need to ask it, because this is something that's talked about all the time. When you're talking about, wanting the jihadis, the jihadi group, or the Salafists to win battles and take cities against the ruling regime, what is the risks there? Because I hear people say, look, I don't like Assad, he's a butcher, he's bad or whatever, it's very sad. I mean, but I don't want terrorists. I don't want Syria to be a hotbed for terrorism. I don't want it to be a hotbed for Wahhabi or Salafist terrorism to export out of the region. Now, of course, that kind of ignores the fact that the Assad regime opened the prisons multiple times to let out jihadists. But if the whole country is run by jihadists, obviously the math is a little different.
Sure, but again, I don't think what I really want, and I think what most people want, is for Assad to just get on a plane and leave. It would be better for it not to be sorted through cities being conquered or anything like that. The government should just leave. And there's state institutions there, and it is, even if some of the state institutions remain, the war is being fought over whether or not this one guy will stay in power. That's why the cities are being bombed. That's why the extreme violence is happening. In the most extreme cases. So, I don't think that we necessarily even should celebrate when jihadists take over a city. I think that's, listen to those words. That's not something that you can say. You can't necessarily even imply a positive out of it. But the regime collapsing, I think, is a fucking positive. And there's no way to spin it as a negative.
Okay, I think I get.
There's just what the consequences will be. That's the problem.
There's just worse and even worse outcome in a way.
No, there's possibility for great outcome. I mean, great. There's possibility for a better outcome. It's if they agree that they can't run the country on their own.
Well,
and they agree that
in my view, right? Even in the dream scenario that we're talking about, where Syria, where all these groups fight themselves into the collapse of the Assad regime, assuming the SNA does something besides just fighting the Kurds for a change.
Right.
And they go out there, they the regime tumbles, and they decide, look, we can't all just fight it out again. We're going to lose. Now, assuming that every side agrees to this, which is already, you got to think every side agrees. So it's not just, one side. You got to hope but if they do, I mean, I don't know, if it is a Lebanon situation where you got different armies and different sides of the countries, like waning influence and stuff like that, that is not a great outcome for a country. For a state to be, even if it isn't geopolitically defined as divided between three parts, if it is divided between 3 or 2 or 4, how many parts when this is all said and done, because they're different militant groups that really have the power on the ground, that is a bad outcome. Is it worse than the systematic butchering of the Syrian people because Assad has the tools and power and the institutions to do it and chooses to? No, but I still don't think it's a good outcome. It's better than what we had. Yeah.
It's a much better outcome. A much better outcome. a bunch of retired warlords is sometimes how peace is made.
Fair enough.
And that kind of sucks to think about. Like, it kind of sucks to think about all these fucking war criminals forming. And also, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Like, Assad is in power. He's in Damascus. The army controls Damascus, and Russia controls Hamaim, and it looks like they're losing control over their... well, they're not losing control, but it looks like they're abandoning their Tartu space, but that doesn't mean that, you know, they're there. Like, they're there, and there's still a fight, and they could always divert...
Oh, I think they still intend to defend it. I mean, the Russians need that for access to the Mediterranean. They did not just invest all these resources to abandon it at the first sign of real trouble.
Yeah. But I also think that they're opening themselves up. Like, if they intervene for Assad, at this point, with Iranian militias kind of getting fucked by the Americans, and then Hezbollah being kind of out of action, I just don't really see... They would be very alone in that fight.
I mean, the only other thing I'm hearing about, because Hezbollah is in a tough place right now. The Russian army is obviously in a tough place right now. The only force I really hear about is like Iraqi militias that Iran finances. But I mean, this is a totally different... I mean, they have to go over the border into a country many of them probably have not been in. Some of them probably have, to fight. And they're going to have to coordinate them to... Like, I don't know how it's going to work. And I don't even know if it's really a threat or a bluff, because do they really want to start funneling their Iraqi militias? And so then they have drained Hezbollah, drained Iraqi militias. Like, they want to keep some of these available in case something happens in Iraq, something happens elsewhere. Like, the Russians need a reserve, the Iranians need a reserve of proxies, since that's how they operate throughout much of the region. Like, I don't really know how it's going to go. I still think there's some punch left in the regime and its backers. But I mean, these last week has been a whirlwind, and I honestly, it's hard to believe it. I don't know if I've still fully registered it. Man, it's crazy, man. Do you have anything else you'd want to say or talk about?
There's so much to talk about. Like, I mean, for me personally, like, honestly, after my first trip to Aleppo, it became immediately harder to sleep. And it has been for like years. And because it just felt like it was this place that was abandoned. And it's not my country. It's not, my homeland. I only went there for a couple short trips, but it's still like incredible to see, because, that citadel was just this like Mordor looming over us for this whole time. And it's just, now it's liberated, albeit by groups that are terrible, but it's not this machine of death. That's the regime that has concentration camps, that has like completely eradicated the landscape and the cities of the country, is crumbling. And we don't know how long that'll take. We don't know if Russia won't nuke the rest of the country to keep Assad in power. But in terms of the government like being able to run itself as the government of Syria, forget it. Like, that was already over.
Do you think there's any way that peace is even possible with Assad in power?
No.
Okay, good answer.
Yeah,
flat
out,
sweet.
No.
Yeah, short and sweet.
Yeah, but because if you're mobilizing, like, if a state is mobilizing resources to fight for something that's like inherent, like if Zelensky were to die, God forbid, Ukraine would keep fighting. Like, that's it. There's if Israel stayed in Lebanon after Hassan Nasrallah died, or if they were tried to make a sustained occupation, people will end up fighting them, and that's just how it will be. Like, people. So when a state mobilizes resources, or an organization mobilizes resources for like a cause that can survive the head of the organization, that's one thing. But like, Assad is not a cause that can survive his death. It's not. They're mobilizing so many resources just for the guy. Like, it's not even really about like protecting the Alawite heartland, or about secular rule, as they call it, their version of it. And it's not about any of that stuff. It's becoming more and more about just, we need to keep this guy in power, because they're losing the security versus the bargain of every dictator is I'll give you security, right? You'll have no rights, but I'll give you security. And right now, the Assad regime is plenty good at taking people's rights away and completely inept at providing security, even for themselves. And that kind of thing makes it really diminishing returns for people to support them. Like Hezbollah has said, fuck it, which is incredible to see. Nuts. Iran is like...
Do you really think that's like their position now? It's like, look,
yes,
what do you want me to do?
definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think they have some places. I think they have some like locations in Syria that are pretty valuable to them as like training facilities or whatever. So I think they'll probably fight pretty hard to keep some kind of presence. But in terms of whether or not they're gonna like fight in Damascus to try and keep Assad in power, it seems that they're not.
Okay. So, chat, do you guys have any questions? I want to make sure chat has an opportunity to ask questions.
Oh, yeah,
I've been
I'd love
asking
that.
other questions. Chat, do you have any
Please.
questions for this man? Oh God. Ugh. Just stretching like a cat.
Oh yeah. You got nothing?
I'm waiting. You say something. It's not like instant response. I'm not telepathically connected. I got to wait for them to type a thing. What are you vaping?
What am I vaping? It's a Geek Bar and it's Sour Apple Bee Pop.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go, Anti-Master. You can have that. You can smoke it yourself.
And you can take that to the bank.
Absolutely. They'll be confused, but you can do that.
Oh, give me a real
What
question.
chat? All the chats. I'm looking at all the chats right now. Does anyone support Baathism anymore in Syria? It's from my
Yeah,
mod, Sepson.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's some people that like are wealthy class of Aleppo, that really benefited from the regime that still want him to stay in power. There's people that have been Baathist thugs their whole life. That's all they know. So I'm sure there's them. I'm sure that some of the Alawite community still is loyal, but I think people when this war ends will be surprised by how many Alawites were pissed off, because I know actually many Alawites from the opposition. So I think that like the short answer is yes, but like it's not really like it sure is crumbling. Like it's not a political ideology that I think that's going to survive very long.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
What were you doing in Kwamishilo in 2017?
I was doing a report for 2018, I think. 2018. It was a report on hospitals in Kamishli, because there were the Turks were trying to prevent.
Is that really? There's an
Close.
O at the end. Oh, okay, got you. Go sworn. Okay, so I'm not a moron. Okay, good.
Yeah, I was doing a report for the NPR affiliate in Philadelphia, on hospitals.
Got you. What key things to look for in the next few days and weeks?
1, how HTS treats minorities. Where detainees are located, like what's happening to their prisoners. Where are Assad's chemical weapons? That's another thing. Like, there's a good chance that he would end up using them. So at some point that's going to come into play, and people are going to have to really think about what the consequences might be if something like that happens. What else? Think about evidence that we're going to need to save. Like, a lot of these regime intelligence bases are going to get overrun, and there's going to be documents galore. And you don't want people running through there setting fire to everything, because a lot of that's going to be priceless evidence. And there's a whole network that has, I think there's like theoretically over 100,000 people in their network of what's basically death camps. And they've been running industrial grade, like, execution facilities. It's basically just like their version of Auschwitz, but like with less of a kill rate, I guess, maybe. And fewer people detained, obviously. But the idea is the same. Like, they have what are functionally death camps. And at some point, I hope that people are going to be able to get in there and get evidence and learn the fate of people. So all these things are important. And of course, watch what the SDF does. There's places, even though the SDF has now turned completely on the regime, there's places where the rebels are very much clashing with them and attacking them, especially SNA. And the SNA has committed a lot of atrocities.
They recently took over. They took over Tel Rifat recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very, very concerning. and we're already seeing footage of them like abusing Kurds. So
Yeah,
that's
and
not,
I saw
you know,
some stuff of like abuse towards female POWs because I think the soldiers
Was that
seemed,
SNA or HCS? It was probably SNA.
I didn't look like no, it was SNA. It was SNA. Sorry, I was got confused with SAA. So many abbreviations. But yeah, no, I saw that video. I saw other ones where they were being beaten. I saw one guy with what looked like a press vest smacking them. Like, I don't know what it is, man, but everybody puts press on their chest. You think if you're in front of a camera, you can just put like press on your chest, I guess, but I don't like it. I don't like it, okay? If you go in front of the camera and just go on like, death to the like, no, I don't think you should be, no, take it off your chest, please. Makes
You
it,
probably shouldn't be saying you're a journalist if you do that. Yeah, I mean, so watch for how they behave. Watch the exuberance of people that are liberated. Like, that's fucking really important. People are going to be reunited. Watch for. And
I've seen those videos already. They're very beautiful.
Incredible, yeah. Man. And obviously, watch for what Russia does. And this is, a lot of people have been dooming about Ukraine lately, but this is a big deal. Like, this is a big blow against Russia.
It is, and like even if they make the calculation that screw the Mediterranean, we don't need that ship, we don't need the air base. What we need is to win this war for our legitimacy. This is much more important for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's still going to be a gigantic blow to Russia's credibility. It's going to be a gigantic blow to the image on the world stage. And it's also going to mean losing a key ally that Putin has made a project of trying to save with the Iranians. I mean, and I mean, either way, like, Russian equipment and Russian men are getting lost in the fray. I mean, I saw Pantsers get captured. I saw air defense systems get captured. I've seen tons of different Russian equipment get captured, and multiple videos of alleged Russian soldiers getting captured. So it's not as simple as like snap your fingers and you're gone. You actually have to withdraw, as we saw in the and let's just say the messy withdrawal from Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what Russia does is going to be crucial, and I mean, I wonder what they can do too, because there are ways for the opposition to mess with their airbase, and you know, I don't even know how willing they would be to like waste precious fighter jets on this.
I do not know. I honestly have no clue, but I know that they're going to do something. They have to do something. They can't just abandon it, but I highly doubt they're going to be able to bring upon the same force on Syria that they did last time. Their air force is just too preoccupied, and it's going to cripple their operations. And I look, we've talked about this before, though. I don't know if me and you have talked about it, but I know I've talked about it before. The thing that Russia needed least was another security crisis. They have dedicated so much resources to this war, whether it was in Kazakhstan with another fuel subsidy protest, whether it was Armenia, whether it was Georgia. If Georgia was to, reverse course, unless the Dream Party collapses, as we've seen the protests on the streets, and, the government collapses, they bring in a pro-EU government, it starts to integrate. That to them is a security crisis. Or Belarus. There's supposed to be elections in Belarus in a year. Let's say the Belarusians don't take it, and they do what they did last time, but on a wider scale, more organized scale. What do? Now, in some circumstances, you can send 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers. You do a quick shoot here, quick shoot there, kill a few hundred people, and it settles it down. But other times, that doesn't work, as it didn't work the first time in Syria, and it doesn't seem to be working now in Syria. And so the last thing they needed for the entirety of this war was another security crisis, but especially now when they're already trying to make difficult decisions about mobilization to get people to go to the war, where I see first time down payments of $30,000 in some regions for these soldiers, like just to join the armed forces and go to the combat zone. So how are they going to be able to scrounge up the money to encourage more people to go save Assad without like large scale mobilization? Which is going to be wildly unpopular.
And you know how they think. Well, I mean, they could support him significantly with minimal commitment. So there's no doubt about that. But you know how they think, which is that, and you know how Putin thinks, which is that the authoritarian nature of these regimes, they see as like protecting them. And what really scared Putin was what happened to Gaddafi. And I think that something like the Assad regime crumbling in the way that it is right now is probably. I think that people might not be making enough of the psychological impact that will have on the Russian leadership, because that's their baby. That was their big intervention. They saw that as their big. They saw their intervention in Syria as their big move against the United States, which it was and it wasn't. But they. So seeing that asset lost is going to have a serious psychological impact.
What does that mean though? Because a psychological impact, like psychic damage or whatever. What does that really mean? Like, I mean, I'm sure it'll piss them off, but I mean, like, it's not like it's gonna be like, I guess we got to pull out of Ukraine. It'll if anything, they'll think we have to win. We have to win. It's do or die. You know, we got no other option. If we lose Syria and then we lose Ukraine back to back, the regime's crumbling.
Yeah, this is making me also somewhat less worried about Trump, because I almost think that like
how do you fuck up this leverage? That's my question. How could you even fuck up that leverage?
Yeah. Well, like, you're not gonna just there's nothing like what's happening in Aleppo and what's happening in Syria. There's nothing you can do. There's literally nothing that Trump can do, one way or the other. It's completely without the consent of like any of the superpowers. So it's really interesting that just they're going their own way, and it's. I was really worried about like Tulsi Gabbard and all that stuff, and now it's just like I want her to be like in the government now. It's
No, never. Keep her far away. Beat her back with a stick. Keep her back. No. The idea of her preparing intelligence briefings for the President of the United States. Oh my God. If we want to watch somebody make a mountain out of a molehill and go on like some weird Iraq style. Look,
I'm kind of sad this didn't happen with her. As actually, honestly, this will significantly hurt her confirmation prospects. But if her the biggest thing she's known for is like supporting the guy that's like cluster fucking out of reality, it's probably not going to play real. Yeah, but like I'm kind of bummed that this didn't happen with her as DNI, because that would have been very funny.
Oh, she has to go through the reports every day about how Assad's crumbling. Yeah. And actually, maybe we can have like a DNI deputy that's like, you know how like you put a kid in the back seat and give him like a play steering wheel? Can we do that with like a bunch of like a big command center with just a bunch of people we hire off Twitter? And they'll be like, and they just pick up Twitter videos and show it to her like, we just got this from our crew, our people on the ground. Just record a reaction. I would pay good money to watch that live reaction from Tulsi Gabbard as this was happening. I'd pay good money.
Are you at the apartment, by the way?
No, I'm in my studio.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Patrick just doxed me. I'm gonna be assassinated within the hour.
Are you gonna be in town for a little bit longer, or how much longer?
I'm leaving within the next 10 to 13, 14 days. Or I want to, because I need to go back for... I told you I was going back for Christmas, man. You said you were coming November. It's now... We're going to be going on mid-December soon.
Bro, I'm juggling 3 wars.
Yeah, well...
I'm juggling 3 wars that
are
changing very rapidly. But I am coming. Are you going to come back at least?
Yeah, of course. I always come back. I'll be back in probably
then
March.
We will see each other.
Well, when are you going to be...
We might...
No, we're not going to see each other.
We're probably not going to see each other then, yeah, unfortunately.
You have already scheduled coming here then?
I haven't, but I can't tell you about all my travel plans. I'll tell you about it when we get off, right?
Okay. I don't know why you would come here in the dead of winter, man. I'm trying to record out here in December. I was trying to film with these air defense crews that they were shooting down drones. And it was, it was interesting filming for the bit I got. But like, God damn, is it cold there out at night. And it is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. And you want to come here at the end of December, January, and February? Well, that's when you want to be here? Why?
I miss everybody. Because I miss everyone, man.
We have to come in the spring. When it'll probably be more active. And B, like, it'll be warmer. It'll be somewhat pleasant. Like, I like snow as much as the next guy, but January snow is not fun snow.
We'll discuss later, but we'll reconvene soonish.
Okay, chat. If he doesn't come when I'm there, you have permission to cyber stalk and harass him.
Oh man, no, not again.
Not again. Not again. Not the first.
Not again.
Not again. Okay, man. Thank you so much for coming on today's stream. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you wanted to shout out, or anything you wanted to like, give a mention to?
I just want to say this really matters, and I think that like a lot of people.
By the way, your camera is zoinked out. It's been zoinked out for a bit.
Oh, really? Hang on 1 second. One sec.
No worries. There you go.
Better? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it should be better. Well,
Okay.
it's still frozen, but whatever. Just wrap it up.
Okay, whatever. Just the point is, this shit matters, and there have been a lot of people that have been fighting without weapons to like keep like the spirit of the revolution alive, and to also document what's going on, and to make it so that this is not like lost to history. And so I think it's important to remember that a ton of people that aren't like HTS fighters have been fighting to get rid of this motherfucker, and and they're still out there, and they're powerful.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick. Where can people find you?
Just Twitter.
Yeah, that's it, guys. Just look up Twitter, and that's his website.
Yeah. Just write Twitter, and that's my no. Pat Hilsman on Twitter.
Pat Hilsman. Is it P-E-T? Patrick Hilsman. There you go. See, now you're learning.
Yeah.
Well, you've been on how many times you've been on fucking like Polish state television to say Poland is good and great or whatever you say over there.
Yeah, that's literally never what I've said.
No, every time it's like Hail Duda or whatever. And and you haven't learned how to shout. Ugh. Terrible. But that's fine. I'll teach you, man.
I had a question for you, actually, though.
Oh, you have a question for me? Okay.
When there was the FPV drone that was hovering above you guys, what were you guys hiding in?
If I tell you, you're going to hate me.
What?
It was an ammunition shed.
Oh, God. A shed.
Oh, yeah. No, man. It was not.
Like wooden walls?
Like, dude, there was open.
With wooden walls?
With open holes that anything could fly through.
Dude, you came. That was like a 50-50 that you're alive right now. Seriously.
Oh well,
that's really bad.
Same worms that'll eat you will eat me.
Well, yeah, but you can still. I don't know. Be careful, man.
Well, yeah, of course, I value my life, but you got to fly close to the sun if you want to take pictures of it.
It didn't seem super. Yeah, but just be careful, man. That was really dangerous.
I appreciate it. I've
Patrick. Had a few moments in my career that stick out as like especially terrifying, and like one of them was with you for sure, and many others were in Syria. But like that footage is really scary. That's very, very dangerous.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's all, I mean, the drones are just so much more active now. I've dealt, I mean, that one was particularly close, but I mean, I think, I don't think I've been on an embed recently where we haven't had drone passovers of some sort.
Yeah, but you don't know if it's yours or theirs sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah, that's true. Actually, I mean, most of the time we still don't know. And that's why there's a ton of, like, friendly drone fire because people keep shooting down their own side's drones. I got complaints about it from the drone pilots.
Well, that's better than the drone pilots friendly firing on the troops.
Yeah, but I haven't really heard much about that.
That's why we have drones.
The friendly fire?
No, because it's better because it's expendable.
That is true. They are cheap. They are cheap.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
Can I tell you? Oh wait, one more thing.
Yeah.
The first time I saw this is like the war journalist brain. The first time I saw one of those fucking things, like the DIJ,
the DJI,
or whatever it's called. Yeah, I was like, oh fuck. I was like, oh, all right. I was like, okay, warfare has completely changed forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. And once you realize how cheap it is, and once you realize the fact that you can control it from how far away, and it's only gotten worse now that they've started adding hard cables to it, so you can't even fucking jam them if you're within like 3 to 5 kilometers, and they can get it to you.
Oh, like, so it's like a wire guided?
Yeah. What the Russians have started doing is they put a wire on it so that, the drone guns and the jammers, they don't work because the connection is from the wire. There's no way to jam it.
Yeah, that's like a tow missile.
Basically, yeah, it's a drone tow missile kind of. Yeah, exactly, actually.
Wow. Fucking A, man. All right, stay safe, all right? Just don't I don't know if you should be fucking around in areas where that stuff is unpredictable like that.
Then I shouldn't be in Ukraine.
But but great work. Yeah, honestly.
Thank you, man.
Do you want to come to Syria?
Do I want to come to Syria?
Yeah.
Message me, okay?
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if I'm going, but
Yeah, let me know. You have a good one, okay?
Yep.
Bye-bye. Dude, read chat. We'll play the blank again. GG. I try. Look, the way it is I have the fucking video up, and then I try to play the video, but if I don't have Discord up over it while the video's playing, so I cannot see the video unless through the smaller screen, then it does that. And so I'm automatically going to the video because I want to watch the video too. Okay, you didn't see it? We'll play it one more time. One more time. Keeping this in the segment. Danbo, fuck you. Okay? End a paragraph. Okay?